What sort of problems does your special diet pose, assuming
When I
you're
travel,
doing a lot of
I have
traveling?
to take it with me. I made an experiment last year of traveling without taking much with me.
Mhm.
I got along all right. There's more and more interest in health food. It's really astonishing what most restaurants serve in relation to some decision like I've made.
Mhm.
You just can't, there's nothing you can order.
Even the vegetable dishes will have been
butter.
prepared in such a way that...
They'll have butter, almost always.
Well,
And the vegetables are notoriously either overcooked and long. They've been cooked for a long time and just sitting there getting grayer and grayer.
Mhm. How much traveling do you do?
Do I do?
No. What?
Last year I traveled almost half the year because I turned 70 last year.
Oh, happy birthday!
And this year I want to travel less, but at the moment you find me in the midst of a tour that lasts until the middle of May.
Mm-hmm. Are you stopping at universities mostly?
In the United States, mostly it's universities,
Mm-hmm.
maybe art museums or something like that, some cultural situation. In Europe, it might be a radio station or a museum, or I'll go there with the Cunningham Dance Company. I've worked for 40 years with the Cunningham Dance Company.
The program you're recording for now, the main audience will be mostly students at Rice and people about the same age in the surrounding
your
areas.
age, not my age.
Right.
Right.
or somewhere in between. But imagine that most people are sadly not going to be very familiar with a lot of the things you've done.
Oh, that's all right. There's so many things to be interested in nowadays
Really
that they don't have time for everything.
I wanted to start by asking about what you did when you were around college age here. I remember that you went to Pomona College for a couple of years and then
I'm a
went to
dropout.
Europe.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, that was great. Did people give you a lot of trouble for that? Or?
No. I was hitchhiking a few years after that in California,
Uh-huh.
and I was picked up by my history professor, and he said, "I'm glad to see you," and I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, you were a dropout."
Mm.
And I said, "Yes." He said, "All the most interesting people were dropouts." It was nice, don't you think?
Very nice. And then...
It's funny, though, that my college class, even though I dropped out, they still think of me as a member of the class.
Mhm.
And so when they're raising money, they want me to give
You're still on the list. That says a lot for them that they've been able to keep up with you all these.
Oh no, there's nothing like college alumni groups. They find everybody's address.
Mm-hmm.
Can't keep a secret from them.
Well, when you were in college, what sort of ideas did you have about
What I was gonna do?
what you'd be doing?
I think everyone is educated to write. We're taught to read and to write and arithmetic, or has it changed?
They're starting to get back to that now.
Isn't that what they teach?
Yes.
They try.
Computers now.
I
too.
suppose
Yeah.
arithmetic is different now because you push that little computer,
Mhm.
but everyone is really equipped to write or to be a poet.
Mhm.
If they're going to be an artist, that's what they're equipped for. To be a musician or to be an artist is not really taught to everyone in school,
Mhm.
as constantly as they teach you how to read and write. So I think that's what I left. When I dropped out of college, I dropped out because I decided I was going to be a writer,
Mhm.
and that a writer would do better to have experience
Mhm.
than to go to school. So I persuaded my family to let me go to Europe.
Uh-huh.
And I was living in Los Angeles then, and actually I put an ad in probably the Los Angeles Times, and I got a ride from there to Galveston here, right here, because I was going to take that line. Does it still run? Probably not. A boat that goes from Houston to Le Havre in France.
Oh.
It was
I
think it was called the French line or something. Anyway, that was when that would be like 28, 29.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Galveston. I got a ride very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I arrived here about 10 days before the boat was sailing.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent the time in Galveston. It was very hot,
Mm-hmm.
muggy, and I remember getting up in the middle of the night, not being able to sleep. And I would walk to the water from the room, which was sort of inland a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd walk into the water, but the water was just as hot as the air.
Mm-hmm.
And it must have been the summer. So I would go back I had trouble sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't normally. Then in the end, the boat sailed not from Galveston, but from Houston.
Oh, did they stop to pick you up? Or
No, so I had to come
you had
back.
to come to
I
Houston.
had to come back here.
Mhm.
I hitchhiked back probably.
Uh-huh. Well, what did you do when you got to Europe at that point?
I bought a bicycle and I rode to. I started out to ride to Paris, and then halfway there I changed my mind and put the bike and myself on the train. Went the rest of the way. And
was it a common thing then? I know it is not, but for people of student age to be exploring Europe that way? Or?
yeah, I think so. And then I got a job guiding tourists around Paris.
Mm-hmm.
There was an agency that had found out that American tourists liked having American college-age kids guide them to these places. I guided some people to Versailles before I ever went there. I got a little book when I knew that I had this job to guide people to Versailles. I bought a little book about Versailles, and I stayed up all night long, and I mapped out all the rooms. And there's this. And we went through the whole thing in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and then we went to that fancy restaurant there where they signed the treaty.
Oh.
You know, with all the mirrors and everything, and I'd gotten to know these people I was guiding. It was the whole family, and I confessed to them that this is my first trip to Versailles. And they said, "You don't have to tell us, we know."
Did they mind?
No, they didn't mind, but they were very amused. They said it was the most entertaining guided tour that they'd had. And they had been to Versailles several times. Wasn't that marvelous?
That's great.
Uh-huh.
Well, I remember.
So they guided me in the afternoon. After lunch.
I wonder what kind of business they were on going to
Well,
Versailles
they
all
just
the time.
felt that they were supposed to have a guide.
Oh, I see. Well, I remember reading that at the time, besides being interested in poetry, you were into architecture and painting and things like that. Were you studying at any academies there or with artists there?
I studied with an architect. I was like do anything, any chore he wanted me to do, and then in return he would teach me.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't have any actual houses to build. What he was doing was remodeling apartments.
Mm-hmm.
So if he had an apartment to remodel, he would send me over to measure all the dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd make a little map of the place for him. then I'd go back to his studio and he'd set me to drawing Greek columns. And I heard him say one day that to be an architect you have to devote your life to architecture. So I told him I have to leave because there were other things I liked as much as architecture.
Would you say that you have devoted your
My
life
to
to music?
Well, I would say so. I'm not sure that everyone would agree. But I feel that I haven't I'm interested in many things, but actually it's music that's brought that about.
Yeah, I see the book you have that just picked up.
Have you read it?
Megatrons? No, I haven't yet. I've seen it around a lot.
You have seen it around. I met the librarian. What's his name? Music librarian.
Oh, Ralph Holloway.
That's right. And he had it on his desk, so I borrowed it from him. I'm glancing at it. It deals largely with changes in American life. But what I think is more important is changes in global life. You'll come to it, maybe.
I think so. Since this trip, have you based most of your activities in the United States, or I guess there have been
I
several
travel
more.
a great deal to Europe, and I'll be there twice in the next few weeks. I have to go to Italy, come back to Massachusetts, and then go to Cologne, and come back. Next January and February, I'm going with the Cunningham Dance Company to India.
Is Merce Cunningham still alive doing? Okay.
No, he's still kicking and dancing.
Yeah. Some stories back to Los Angeles, what I remember reading is that
He's
you were-
younger than I am.
Oh,
Merce Cunningham. I'm the old one. What do you remember? Right.
Organizing a course with neighborhood housewives, getting them to subscribe to a series of lectures
lectures.
that you were giving about, at the time, contemporary music. That was very inspirational to me to be able to. What sort of things were you talking about there? Schoenberg?
Well, I explained to them that I was enthusiastic about modern painting, modern music, and that I didn't know, I was no authority, but that I would each week find out. I'd spend a week getting enough information to give them a chat. And they liked the idea. So I got that way. I got to make a kind of survey of modern painting and modern music, and then give it to those people. It was through that I came to the conclusion that I wanted to follow Schoenberg rather than Stravinsky.
You were both living in Los Angeles, and you studied from him
I was
for a while?
living in Santa Monica at that time, and it was later that I studied with him.
In light of your work since you studied with him, do you feel that you followed?
That I'm still related to him.
Was there a time where you thought you broke off, or?
For a while, I guess there have been both of those feelings, both the sense of separation and the sense of remaining close. I think that if I had a conversation with him now, he's dead, of course, I can't talk to him, but if he were still alive, I think I could persuade him that my use of chance operations has been more or less in line with his, with the radical meaning of his thinking.
What was it that got you interested in his line rather than Stravinsky's?
Well, I thought the idea of the composing with the 12 tones was very attractive, because I thought of it as giving equal importance to each one of the tones.
Mhm.
I preferred that to Stravinsky's maintaining, particularly in his later work, which is neoclassical,
Mhm.
in maintaining aspects of tonality.
Mhm.
My work as a whole could be thought of as alternatives to tonality,
Mhm.
or you could think of it as finding ways to make music that is hospitable to noises.
Mhm.
Or you could think of it as music where duration or time is taken as the basis of music rather than the things that happen in the time. I'm not so concerned about the conventional relationships of sounds that most music teaching is about.
In the course of all your works, do you see it as a continuous kind of evolution, or were there certain points where you decided to incorporate another element? So my understanding is that first you were emphasizing percussion and different timbres with percussion, but still writing rhythms out pretty explicitly exactly what you wanted. When did the chance elements come in?
Around 1950, 51, 52, around in there. And a little bit earlier, I worked not with chance operations, but with the magic square. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
If you take a square with an odd number of rows and files,
Mhm.
and put the number 1 in the middle of the lowest row, and then make the knights move in chess off to the right, and put the number 2, and continue this process. And when you go off the square, imagine that you're still on it in the corresponding place. And if you come to a square that's filled up, you go back to the one you were coming from and put it underneath that, and then continue. If you do that, you end up with this square in which all the rows and all the files and all the diagonals add up to the same number. That's why it's called magic square. It's one of those mathematical curiosities. And I, instead of putting numbers then in the rows, I put sounds, and then I made moves on charts. And I could change the music by changing the moves. So forth. I wrote 2 pieces like that. One was called 16 Dances, and the other was called Concerto for Prepared Piano and Chamber Orchestra. And it was in the course of writing the second of those pieces that I came across for the second time the I Ching. And then I saw immediately that that was a better way to proceed than to proceed with the magic square. These ideas were more or less in the air. At the same time that I was working with the magic square in this country, I later learned that a white Russian composer living in Paris was also working with the magic square.
Is it
Vishnegradsky. You know, that's the same thing as what happens with inventors. That 2 people invent the same thing at the same time, and one of them gets to the post office first.
Is that the case with your father? Yeah. That's, I remember reading about that too. Are you still in things you write now using the I Ching? What other sorts of techniques have?
I use star maps. And recently I've used templates, cut out shapes, you know, to both, if I have a triangle, the 3 points of it can indicate tones on a page where the whole space is potentially sound. And or I can punch holes in such a template at chance-determined points. I use a ruler that can divide any length into 64 parts, because the I Ching works with 64. And this ruler works on a spring. It's called the Gerber Scientific Variable Scale. You can't buy it in the store. You have to order one. Have it made.
Are they expensive?
Well, everything's expensive nowadays, even a bowl of brown rice. But I think it costs around $200, which isn't much for something that is really so marvelous.
Did you get a chance to go through the Fondren Library at Rice to see the exhibit they had set up?
Yes, that was very nice, don't you think?
Very interesting. Some of my friends have commented on it, and it's, to them, a first exposure, and they think it's quite unusual, too. How do you react to things like that? All the furor in the press, anyway, I'm sure not with you, about what you're trying to do, or people second-guessing you, or accusing you of playing games, or, well, later, of...
Oh, if people, if they ask me questions like you are, then I'm willing to answer. Or if they accuse me of doing something bad, I can defend myself. I don't know. Every now and then someone gets very angry. But mostly I receive letters of friendly feelings. I don't pay much attention to all. If I'm going to do any more work, which I think I am, I have to keep my mind clear of such things. In other words, I have my life, and my work has its life, and I don't wish my work ill. On the other hand, it'll sometimes be better than other times. It'll get along better in the society sometimes than other times.
Well,
don't you think? What are you interested in?
Me? Well, I'm interested in getting through with school before I quit. And I'm studying...
You're not going to drop out then?
Yeah, I think I'll stick it out a little longer.
And what are you studying?
I'm studying music composition, and this is my first year to do it. I'm enjoying that.
Good.
And
this is a very good school, isn't it?
It's hard to get into, and they pay people.
That's
pay
what I
the
heard.
Professors.
And it's a small school.
And
I heard there are 1,000 more trees than there are students.
That could be.
If you'd been here a month before too, you would have seen there are at least 10,000 more birds than students.
Really?
Yeah.
How big are they? Are they like crows or what?
They're smaller than crows. They're cowbirds. Just little 6-inch blackbirds.
Are they edible?
Not after the lawnmowers get through with them, usually.
We sometimes suspect the food service of trying them out, but I don't think anybody's been able to substantiate that one.